right now is a part of a hallway that extended further beyond this. That was opened in 1964. And this hallway housed Red Deer College. And it stayed here until 1968. And it's important in terms of Thurber's history. But before I get to that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what happened here in 1947. In 1947, the superintendent of Red Deer County, his name was Lindsay Thurber, was looking for a school setting or a place to build a school that would house mainly rural students. And what you need to visualize right now is that where we are, this is Lindsay Thurber as it is today, part of it. Between now here and the Red Deer River was full of army huts. During the Second World War, about 1,000 soldiers every 4 months were trained here and then sent overseas. Well, to house them, you had to have a lot of dormitories. You had to have a drill hall. And if you know where the Memorial Center is, that was the Army Drill Hall. He ended up at the 1947, as I mentioned, looking for accommodation for a new school. He found this. And what was advantageous about this, it had a drill hall for phys ed, plus to build all the dorms for the military during their training period. He was able to make those into classrooms. He also had, because they were training 1,000 soldiers at a time, they had to have a large canteen. And in addition to that, they had to have a large kitchen. So you had a drill hall, you had all the accommodation for 1,000 soldiers, and you had a big cafeteria. But in addition to that, on the other side of the Memorial Center, there's another building that still exists today. That was a maintenance shop. That's where they built all the huts. So they had electricity over there. They had metalwork over there. They had woodworking over there. They had automotives. They had to have military vehicles. That's where they worked on the military vehicles. All that was sitting here redundant. And he got the government to agree to allow him to have a high school built here, and it was called the Red Deer Composite High School. And he got it all for $1. When they opened the school in 1947, it was mainly farm kids that were here. In fact, in 1947, the school population in this Lindsay Thurber, it was called, that time called the Red Deer Common School, was 400. 260 of those lived in the dorms. So they were all farm kids. So the majority of the students, when this opened up in 1947, were rural students. Some of them, obviously, coming from the farms, needed to work with their parents, particularly during harvest time. And so they came back to school after the harvest is over. Well, they had already missed maybe a month, month and a half, 2 months of schooling. Well, that's got the school here thinking, maybe we could redesign our program under, instead of a 10-month facility or a semester facility, why not a trimester? We would break the school year up into 3 equal parts, and the classes would be long enough that you would meet the government regulations in terms of instructional time. And then when that was over, mid-November, then you'd start new classes. Well, that was a real plus for farm kids. Those who had to be home helping the parents out could now come here and start in November and not really lose any schooling at all. Because a lot of those students that missed the first month and a half, 2 months, obviously they had trouble completing the course properly, and many of them dropped out. So that became a real plus for the farm kids, but it also attracted a number of students from outside of this area. They ended up having some students coming from Milk River. They had them coming from Rocky Mountain House, from the far north. They even had some students in here from Whitehorse. And it was because you had dorms and you had a trimester. What you're looking at here is what we call Memorial Wall. And there's quite a bit of history behind this, and I'll give that to you because this is an important site, not only for the school, but it's an important site for Red Deer itself. It is designated as one of these sites in terms of remembrance. The very beginning of this goes back to the First World War, and this is a list of all the soldiers that were killed that graduated from the Red Deer Composite High School. And that's what it was called back in those early days. This is a plaque with the names of all the people that were killed during the Second World War. Now you may ask, well, what about all these pictures? And that's what I'd like to talk about in terms of making this into a memorial wall for Red Deer City also. So we had the students go to Paris, look around Paris, study it beforehand, and then we went to visit grave sites. And one of the teachers, Rob Porca, got the archives in Ottawa to give us the names, pictures, and grave sites, descriptors of all these students. And for the next 13 years, we went and visited one of the grave sites. And on that grave site, we had a picture. You can see the picture of the soldiers. And we ended up putting a special plaque commemorating that event, along with a picture of the actual soldiers. School that wanted to take maybe a science class, they could go to Lindsay Thurber. So this is Red Deer Vocational School. So 1963. By 1970, 4 wings, and this school, that close together, they said, why don't we unite them into one school? And to try and bring these schools together when they united it all, they decided to use the labs that are in the vocational school, and that's where now to bring this all together, because it's quite a monster school, they ended up bringing over here, because the physics was over here, they brought the math department. And then they brought over the guidance department. Well, it just ended up to be a bit of a monster.
It was a really interesting project in that it was intended to be an educational experience for the students right from the very start. That we kept the existing school operational until the very end so the students could experience the construction of it. But not only did they see the construction, we got involved with the school from the very start and created a student design committee where we met with them on several different occasions at the school, as well as brought them into our office to teach them what an architect actually does. Most of them didn't have a clue, and so we really educated them on how you design a building such as a school, what goes into it, what are the important elements. Then throughout that process, as we took the evolution of the school designs going through, we got the students involved to provide some input. Of course, it was directed input into there. We didn't give them a blank piece of paper, but we allowed them some thoughts and quite a bit of input on to how the school goes in. And so it was quite successful, from looking at mechanical systems to electrical systems. The students were actually very fascinated with the civil engineering that went into it, from wastewater and a water drainage point of view. We worked with them quite extensively on the interior color selections, the space planning, the handicap accessibility. One of the key challenges that we actually had with working with the students at the very start was getting them to think big. Give us the ideas to what you would like to see in a school, how it would work. They were very reserved. They did not expand upon their ideas to think creatively, to think very broad in there. But the one commonality that they had from the very start was that the students that have both mental health challenges and mobility challenges wanted to be front and center. So when we were working with our designers on our site plans and our overall building spaces, then taking them back to the students always looked at it, how do we make sure that a student in a wheelchair feels as important as any other student in the school goes. So we did such things with the assistance of the students as putting the elevator right in the front. Typically in schools, elevators are tucked away, you don't see them a great deal, but we made sure that the elevator was right in the front of the school so that anybody in a wheelchair, anybody with mobility issues or mental health challenges that needs to have that vertical transportation assistance on there knew where it was. You don't have to ask in that school where the elevator is. And so that was just one of the things that the students brought in. Some of the others was that initially we had the foundations and strategy classrooms located up on the second floor, wanting to have some nice views and some opportunities for patio decks on the second floor for them. But instead the students said, we need to bring those down to the ground floor so it's easier for those kids. Easier for the parents to come in and see their children as they're there, easier for the kids to come in the morning, to get out in the afternoon, to also get out in the case of an emergency. So with the support of the school board and the students' recommendations working with us, our designers went back to the table and found ways that we could bring those very important classrooms down to the main floor. They wanted to have an outdoor space that these kids could go out to. They could do experiments. They could just have their time out there where they're not being pressured by any of the other students. They're not feeling like they're not the same as the other kids. And so we designed a secure space outside that they've now turned into some wonderful activity areas, such as growing gardens, vegetables, and things like this in that area. And so that's become a really important aspect of the school that is not only designed for this particular sector of the student population, but it's also controlled and managed. So remember when we went to the feeder schools to West Park Middle School, so we could get some input in for the future generations moving in here, that we spoke with the grade 6s, the grade 5, the grade 4s, and even down to the grades 3 students at West Park Elementary School, Maddie McCullough, and just the ideas that they brought into the school. Do you remember that?
I do, and thinking that those students that were not even in grade 3 would be probably the first grade of class of grade 6s going into the new school, and making sure that some of their ideas and wants for school would be implemented into the design of the project.
Yeah, it has some great ideas that we did end up developing into the project, I remember. And overall, there was just some great thought and some great leadership exhibited by these students. They were nervous when we first went down.
Yeah.
There's these architects coming in and speaking to them.
Yeah.
I remember how nervous they were. But then once they got talking, then we almost couldn't shut them up. They just kept on going and coming with ideas. We want this, we want that. But it was all about creating a universal environment.
Yeah. It also brought in, for the grade 5s that we met with that were going into West Park that following fall, it kind of brought like a common interest between a handful of these grade 5 students that turned into grade 6 that we got to meet with during the design meetings with them, just because they all knew each other, or could talk about things that they had brought to the design when they met with us.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting, taking when we were doing the final tours and some of the public tours that you and I have certainly given a lot over the years of West Park, but having those students come up and coming up to us and saying, "Oh, Mr. Perry, do you remember when you were speaking to me at Maddie McCullough?
Yeah.
And we gave you those ideas, and then I would take them around and show them, yeah, actually your idea we used here.
Mm-hmm.
We implemented that here." That was pretty exciting.
It was very exciting.
The Alberta Sport Hall of Fame, of course, has got a pretty long history. It began back in the late 50s, 57, 58, and in those early years, the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame was under the auspices of Sport Alberta, and eventually, as time went on, it became operated by a society. I believe Dr. Herb McLaughlin and Jerry Glassford were integrally involved, in Gene Leipert, and so the Hall of Fame began its history as an organization whose purpose was to honor sportsmen and sportswomen from across the province, and to recognize that it's important that artifacts of a sport history were maintained. And it was really felt and urged that in order to provide the real stature that this hall should have, there should be a permanent home developed for it. It was thought that a spot here on the upper level of Heritage Ranch would be a really good place, particularly given its access to Highway 2 and the fact that a provincial museum such as the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame Museum would depend on visitors coming from across the province, and the busy Highway 2 would help with that. At the end of the day, it was felt that this would be the best place for both the permanent home for the city, for the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame Museum, and to attract tourism to the city of Red Deer. One of the key components behind our conversations in the early days was making sure that the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame and Museum, as you agree, remained contemporary. That it was something that we could use in order to advance not only tourism, but also tell the story of Alberta. And by telling the story of Albertans and telling the story of their journey, we could tell the story of Alberta, and not only that, give a window to our present and a window to our future, because that's what the past does. That's what history does. It provides us with that window. We had to make sure that in the early days that the concept was to develop partnerships with the province, and partnerships would include all sorts of avenues. We wanted to make sure the provincial sport organizations were involved in telling their stories. So that's why there's a Hockey Alberta component to it. We wanted to make sure that there was important partnerships with other components. Cultural and Indigenous were part of that partnership. So the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame Museum, I'm quite sure as we evolved, made sure that it was the type of inclusive type of an organization that included all aspects of sport within the province. The Alberta Games movement, I would say, has been a significant movement for the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame Museum. It's followed that. Our recent Canada Games experience here in Red Deer has really brought a lot of focus to the Hall of Fame insofar as we've been able to focus on the developing athlete as to where they are now and where can they be in the future. So that's part of the Hall of Fame's focus as well. I would really encourage people to come up here and see what is here. I guess the mandate and the mission of the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame is really to present a living history of the province of Alberta. And there are people here who have a story to tell that talk about the cultural values of our province and the evolution of our province. For the purposes of making sure that people are aware that when we're making decisions in the present and the future, they have a foundation. The foundation is strong and the foundation is valid. And so the Alberta Sport Hall of Fame and Museum should be a place where people can come and get an understanding of that.
Give you a little background about the Red Deer Ski Club. I came to Red Deer in 1957, and I worked with a hardware store at that time. And then I met Don Moore, and Don Moore was the director of the city recreation department. And Don and I started and held a meeting, and with 3 other people, and we started up the Red Deer Ski Club at that time. Starting the ski club, and it grew quite rapidly. We got a ski area going on Northy's property on out by Riverbend there. By 3 Mile Bend is where we started, and we created a little ski hill there and put a rope tow on it and things like that, and we had quite a little time there. For the select spot that the sun didn't melt the snow off all the time and things like that. And the one we chose was where the canyon is today. Now, that was done to Mr. Bauer, and he had that piece of property at that point. Of course, he wasn't using the hill because there was all kinds of trees on it, but which we had to make arrangements to cut off. Now, we were a gung-ho bunch of people, so we decided, well, maybe we go out every weekend and cut trees off the ski hill. And that was a horrendous job, and we were seeing we weren't getting anywhere too fast, so we decided to get a hold of, it was Harry Boomer, and that was Boomer Brothers Construction, and they had a Caterpillar, or a number of Caterpillars, but they had a D8, and he took the trees off the first ski run there on at the Canyon Ski Hill. And the road only went down 3/4 of the way because the other quarter belonged to the Crown land, and then of course we couldn't build anything on Crown land, so we decided to build the lodge 3/4 of the way down. And then we had, of course, the rope tow, and I can remember going up to Edmonton to get a precast drive for the rope tow, and we had a rope tow there from 3/4 the way up the hill. And then we got permission to cut the trees down to the river and go from there. A company formed, and they bought the ski club out, and they had at that point now owned the ski hill. So at that point, they decided to cut the rest of the run down and also build a lodge at the bottom, which is there today.
Question how this all got started. So we took it over in June 1st of 2010, and I'm not entirely sure why we decided to do all this.
Over the years now, making subtle improvements, making things more efficient, being able to improve our infrastructure for snowmaking. So on a season like such as this, where it's extremely mild, we're still able to produce enough snow for people to come ski on, and not be surprised. Like, we have tons of snow out here despite the fact it's been so mild.
Exactly, yeah. A lot of the changes people don't see. A lot of it is underground. And it's the stuff that people don't see that allows us to operate with top-of-the-line snowmaking equipment, top-of-the-line grooming equipment. So it really is the old canyon in some ways, but in many ways, everything is new and allows for really essentially world-class hill conditions with world-class technology.
You know, it feels to me that canyon can really become something special, that you're not going to have to drive 2 or 3 hours to get to a mountain destination when you can have kind of that experience here. Whereas the drive to the mountains are expensive, and you know we can offer a similar experience just minutes from your door.
You know, as we all know, the Alpine Coaster is the only one in Alberta. There are some in BC, but that is kind of the major attraction. Our summer tubing slide, I believe, is 350 feet long.
375.
375 feet long, so it is the longest summer tubing slide in Western Canada. And now with this Canyon Adventure Park planned for summer 2024, we're excited to bring new, exciting activities for not only the Red Deer and Central Alberta community, but also for people all over Alberta to enjoy, you know, the best that tourism has to offer close to home.